The deafening roar of tires on wet asphalt mingled with the rumble of engines as Mary stepped off the bus at the city's central stop. It was Monday, 7 in the morning, and the fine March rain transformed the streets into dark mirrors reflecting the traffic lights. She carefully held her briefcase to her chest, shielding it from the persistent drizzle as she walked toward the building housing the Department of Social Services. At 62, Mary carried on her stooped shoulders the weight of decades dedicated to caring for others, but also the lightness of someone who had found purpose in every act of compassion. Her small, unassuming figure went unnoticed among the hurried passers-by. Her gray hair, always tied in a simple bun, framed a face etched with wrinkles that told stories of sleepless nights beside hospital beds, of hands held in moments of farewell, of tears wiped away in silent corridors. Mary had been a nurse for 40 years at a public hospital in the suburbs, where she learned that true medicine wasn't just in the remedies, but in the comforting gaze, the soothing word, the touch that conveyed hope. Now retired, she dedicated 3 mornings a week to volunteer work, visiting seniors in nursing homes and assisting vulnerable families. That particular morning, she carried in her briefcase the reports of her latest home visits, stories of neglect and loneliness that she was slowly transforming into narratives of restored dignity. Each document represented a life, a name, a story that deserved to be seen and heard. The Department of Social Services building rose imposingly before her, its mirrored glass walls seeming to reflect more than just the street scenes. Mary climbed the marble steps with measured paces, feeling the weight of years and the morning dampness in her joints. The entrance hall was spacious and modern, with gleaming floors and air conditioning that contrasted with the human warmth she was used to finding in the places where she worked. At the reception desk, a young woman with blonde hair and perfectly manicured nails typed on the computer with impressive speed, without looking up when Mary approached the counter. Her name tag identified her as Carla, an administrative intern. Mary waited a few seconds, observing the frantic movement of fingers across the keyboard, before clearing her throat discreetly to attract attention. "Good morning," Mary said in a soft but firm voice. "I've come to deliver the reports from this week's home visits." Carla briefly raised her eyes, making a barely concealed expression of impatience. "Oh, you're the visiting lady," she mumbled, extending her hand without getting up from her chair. "Just leave them there. I'll take a look later." Mary felt a pang in her chest at the coldness of the treatment, but maintained her composure. "Actually, some cases are urgent. There's a family with 3 children who need immediate food assistance, and an 80-year-old man who is without his heart medication." "Don't you understand that we have priorities here?" Carla interrupted, now visibly irritated. "These weekend visits are all very nice, but they can't interrupt the serious work we do during the week. Leave the papers there and go away, please." The silence that followed seemed to echo throughout the hall. Mary felt her face flush, not with shame, but with a deep sadness that welled up in her chest and spread like a cold wave. Other people in the reception area, hurried employees, citizens waiting for service, looked away, pretending not to have witnessed the scene. Embarrassment hung in the air like a dense cloud, and Mary realized that her volunteer dedication had been reduced to an administrative inconvenience. With slightly trembling hands, she placed the briefcase on the counter and stepped back a few paces. "I understand," she said simply, her voice maintaining its dignity despite the humiliation. "I just wanted you to know that behind each report are real people, with names, dreams, and needs. They're not just numbers or statistics." Carla didn't even look up from the computer. "Yeah, okay, you can go now." Mary turned slowly, feeling the weight of each step toward the exit. The people in the hall continued their activities as if nothing had happened, but she knew that her dignity had been publicly wounded. 40 years caring for human lives, and now she was treated as an inconvenient intruder in a place that should be, par excellence, dedicated to social care. As she walked down the corridors toward the exit, Mary paused before a plaque on the wall listing the institution's values: commitment, respect, human dignity, excellence in service. The words seemed to mock her, transforming into empty concepts in the face of the reality she had just experienced. For a moment, her legs seemed to weaken, and she discreetly leaned against the wall, closing her eyes and breathing deeply. It was at that moment that a gentle but firm voice echoed behind her. "Excuse me." Mary turned and saw a man of about 50, tall and elegant, wearing a sober suit and carrying a leather briefcase. His graying temples and discreetly framed glasses gave him an air of respectful seriousness. He went directly to the reception desk, and Mary noticed that his presence immediately changed the atmosphere of the room. "Good morning, Carla," the man said, reading the employee's name tag. "I'm Dr. Edward Meneses, the new deputy secretary. I just witnessed your interaction with this lady, and I'd like to understand the situation better." Carla visibly paled, stammering an incoherent response. "Oh, Dr. Meneses, it's just she always comes here with these reports, and—" "She has a name," Dr. Meneses interrupted, his voice maintaining its respectful tone, but carrying an undeniable authority. "And from what I've observed, she's doing exactly what we expect from our volunteer partners, bringing valuable information about the needs of the community we serve." Silence again filled the hall, but this time it was different. Not the awkward silence of humiliation, but the respectful silence of recognizing something important was happening. Dr. Meneses walked over to Mary, who was still standing near the wall, and extended his hand. "Allow thee to properly introduce myself. I'm Edward Meneses, and I've just assumed the position of Assistant Secretary here. Could you tell me your name and tell me a little about your volunteer work?" Mary felt a wave of relief and dignity returning to her chest. "Mary Santos," she replied, shaking his hand. "I'm a retired nurse, and I've been making home visits voluntarily for 2 years. I try to identify families and seniors who need support from the Department of Social Services." Dr. Meneses nodded respectfully. "Nurse Mary, your work is exactly the kind of partnership this department should value and strengthen. Would you accompany me to my office so we can discuss your reports with the attention they deserve?" As they walked down the halls, Dr. Meneses began to talk about his professional career. He had worked for decades in public hospitals where he learned to recognize the invaluable worth of nursing professionals. "You are the soul of healthcare," he said. "Doctors diagnose and prescribe, but it's the nurses who heal, who comfort, who humanize the recovery process." In his office, Dr. Meneses offered Mary a comfortable chair and served her coffee. "Now, please, tell me about the cases you brought today. I want to hear every story." Mary opened her briefcase and, for the first time that morning, felt that her words would have the weight and importance they deserved. She began talking about Mrs. Adelaide, 83 years old, who lived alone in a house without running water and subsisted on a minimum wage pension. There was also the Silva family, an unemployed mother with 3 young children living in a rented room where the dampness caused constant respiratory problems in the children. "And there's the case of Mr. Anthony," Mary continued, her voice carrying contained emotion. "Widower, former construction worker who has been without hypertension medication for 3 weeks because he can't renew his SUS card. He told me he'd rather go hungry than have to bother anyone asking for help." Dr. Meneses listened to every word with complete attention, taking notes and asking specific questions about addresses, necessary documentation, and the urgency of each case. Mary realized that finally her information was being treated as what it really was: bridges between vulnerable human lives and the public resources that could transform those realities. "Mary," said Dr. Meneses, after hearing all the reports, "I want you to know that your work represents the best of organized civil society. You are doing exactly what our Constitution envisions when it talks about social participation in public policies." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "You know, I took on this role just a week ago, coming from a career in public hospitals. My goal here is to build bridges between public administration and people like you who know social reality in a concrete and human way." Mary felt tears welling up in her eyes, not of sadness, but of profound relief. After 2 years of making volunteer visits, she finally found someone who understood the value of her work not as a favor or hobby, but as an essential contribution to social justice. "I will make sure that all the cases you brought are addressed this week," Dr. Meneses continued. "More than that, I'd like to propose a formal partnership. How about we create a structured home visit program where trained volunteers like you work directly with us in identifying and supporting vulnerable families?" The proposal left Mary speechless. In a few minutes, she had gone from humiliation to appreciation, from neglect to recognition. "It would be an honor," she replied, her voice choked with emotion. Dr. Meneses returned to his desk and picked up a sheet of official letterhead. "I'm going to write an official note acknowledging your volunteer work and recommending that all employees of this department treat you and other volunteers with the respect and cooperation they deserve." As he wrote, he continued talking. "Mary, I want you to understand something important. What happened at the reception today wasn't just an administrative misunderstanding. It was a reflection of how, sometimes, we lose sight of the fundamental purpose of public service: serving people, not processes." Their conversation was interrupted by a discreet knock on the door. It was Carla, visibly nervous, asking permission to enter. Dr. Meneses invited her to sit down, and Mary observed the transformation in the young employee's posture. "Dr. Meneses," Carla began, "I came to apologize for my behavior at the reception. It wasn't professional or correct on my part." Mary felt a mixture of satisfaction and compassion. The young woman had clearly understood the seriousness of her attitude, and that was more important than any administrative punishment. "Carla," Dr. Meneses said firmly, but without hostility, "what happened this morning is a learning opportunity for all of us. Mrs. Mary dedicated 40 years of her professional life caring for people, and now she continues this work as a volunteer. She deserves not only respect, but our gratitude." He then turned to Mary. "I would like you to accept our official apologies and give us a second chance to show how much we value partners like you." Mary looked at Carla and saw in her not the arrogant employee of the morning, but a young woman who was genuinely reflecting on her actions. "Everyone makes mistakes," Mary said kindly. "The important thing is that we learn from them and grow as people." Dr. Meneses smiled and addressed Carla. "From today on, Mrs. Mary will be our official partner in the home visit program. I would like you to be responsible for providing all the administrative support she needs. Consider this an opportunity to learn about the true meaning of public service." Carla nodded vigorously. "Yes, sir. It will be an honor to work with Mrs. Mary." At this point, let me pause the narrative to share something important with you all. Stories like this remind us of the transformative power of respect and human dignity. If you are moved by this narrative, if it sparks reflection on how we treat each other in our daily lives, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Sharing these stories is a way to multiply small gestures of humanity that can transform our society. When we return to our story, Dr. Meneses proposed that Mary return the following week for a meeting with the entire Department of Social Services team. "I want you to share your journey and explain how you see social work in practice. Our staff needs to understand that we don't deal with numbers or statistics, but with complex and dignified human lives." Mary accepted the invitation, feeling truly valued for the first time in a long time. When she said goodbye, Dr. Meneses walked her to the reception area where Carla was waiting with a completely different demeanor than in the morning. "Mrs. Mary," Carla said, "when you come back next week, I'd love to hear about your work on the home visits. I'm realizing there's a lot I can learn." Mary smiled and gently touched the young woman's arm. "It will be a pleasure, dear, and thank you for being open to learning. That shows a lot of maturity." As she walked out of the building, Mary felt she was carrying something far more valuable than when she arrived. The certainty that her work had purpose and recognition. But more than that, she had witnessed an authentic transformation, not only in her own situation, but in the attitude of people who, from that day forward, would have a different understanding of the value of volunteer work and the dignified treatment everyone deserves. The rain had stopped, and the sun was beginning to break through the clouds, creating small rainbows in the puddles on the sidewalks. Mary walked towards the bus stop with lighter steps, thinking about the families she would visit the following afternoon. Now she knew that her information and recommendations would have the appropriate weight and attention, and that meant lives could be effectively transformed. On the bus ride home, Mary reflected on the events of the morning. She had started the day facing disrespect and would end it being recognized as an official partner of the department. But what impressed her most was how Dr. Meneses had handled the entire situation. Without humiliating Carla, without creating unnecessary conflict, but clearly establishing the values that should guide everyone's work. That night, Mary called her daughter to tell her about the day. "Mom," her daughter said after hearing the whole story, "what moves me most about this story is not just the recognition you received, but how you maintained your dignity even at the most difficult moment. You taught everyone there a lesson about resilience and grace." Mary smiled, feeling that perhaps this was the greatest achievement of the day, having remained true to her values even in the face of adversity. The following week, Mary returned to the department for the meeting with the team. The reception was completely different. Carla greeted her warmly and escorted her to the meeting room, where about 20 staff members were waiting to hear her. Dr. Meneses introduced her as our new partner in the Home Assistance Program and invited her to speak about her experience. Mary began by talking about her career as a nurse, but soon shifted the focus to the families she had met over the past 2 years. "When we visit a home," she explained, "we don't just go to identify material needs. We go to restore dignity to people who often feel invisible. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is our genuine attention and our sincere interest in their story." She told about Mr. John, an elderly man who lived alone, and who, after her regular visits, started taking care of a small garden in his backyard again. "He told me he had lost the will to plant because no one would come to see his flowers grow. Now, every week, he shows me the new seedlings with the pride of a child." The audience was visibly moved. Mary continued, "Our work here is not just about managing resources or following protocols. It's about restoring hope, recognizing dignity, and creating authentic human connections." At the end of the presentation, the staff members asked several questions about approach techniques, how to identify unspoken needs, and how to maintain the balance between closeness and professionalism. Mary answered each question with concrete examples from her experience, transforming abstract concepts into real and understandable situations. Carla, who had been paying close attention throughout the presentation, raised her hand. "Mrs. Mary, I would like to publicly apologize for the way I treated you last week. Your example made me realize that I had lost sight of the real purpose of our work here." Mary replied kindly, "Carla, we all sometimes get lost in the routine and forget why we do what we do. The important thing is always to be willing to start over with more awareness and humanity." Dr. Meneses concluded the meeting by announcing the formalization of the partnership program with volunteers and appointing Mary as coordinator of home visits. "From today on," he said, "we will have a clear protocol for receiving, training, and supporting citizens who want to contribute voluntarily to our social mission. Months later, the program had grown significantly. Mary coordinated a team of 15 volunteers, all properly trained and supported by the department. Carla had become her main administrative assistant and developed a genuine passion for social work. On a Friday afternoon, as Mary was organizing her weekly reports, Carla entered her office with a radiant smile. "Mary, you need to know that Mr. Anthony, the one who was without hypertension medication, got a spot in the city's gardening course. He told me he wants to learn how to take care of plants to brighten up the yards of the houses we visit." Mary felt her heart warm. This was exactly the transformation she had always dreamed of seeing. Vulnerable people becoming protagonists of positive change in their own lives and in the lives of others. "And there's more," Carla continued. "Mrs. Adelaide wants to volunteer to teach sewing to the young mothers in the program. She says she has a lot of knowledge to share and that it would make her feel useful again." Mary laughed, remembering the 83-year-old woman she had met months ago, alone and discouraged. "See how people flourish when they feel valued," she said. "Mrs. Adelaide always had so much to offer. She just needed someone to recognize that." At that moment, Dr. Manessis entered the room carrying an official envelope. "Mary, a letter just arrived from the mayor's office. Our home visitation program has been chosen as a model to be replicated in other cities in the region." Mary held the envelope with slightly trembling hands, unable to believe what she was hearing. "This means that the methodology we developed here will help people in other places?" "Exactly," replied Dr. Manessis. "And the mayor wants you to present the program at the next regional meeting of social workers. Your experience as a nurse and volunteer coordinator will be essential to inspire other professionals." Carla applauded enthusiastically. "Mary, you deserve all this recognition. When I think about how I treated you on the first day, I feel ashamed, but also grateful for having learned so much from your example." Mary looked at the two young professionals in front of her and felt a deep gratitude. "You know what moves me most about this whole story?" she said. "It's not the official recognition or the expansion of the program. It's knowing that we managed to create a culture of respect and appreciation for people, regardless of their age, social status, or role." She walked to the window and watched the street activity. "Every time one of our volunteers is received with dignity, every time a vulnerable family is treated with respect, every time we recognize the value of each person's small contributions, we are building a more just and humane society." Dr. Manessis and Carla remained silent for a few moments, absorbing the depth of Mary's words. It was true. What had begun as a social assistance program had transformed into something much greater, a change in mentality about the value of human dignity and the transformative power of mutual respect. "Mary," Dr. Manessis finally said, "I want you to know that you haven't just changed the way we work here. You've changed who we are as people and as professionals." Carla nodded vigorously. "I became a better person after I met you. I learned that true professionalism lies not in cold efficiency, but in the ability to see and value the humanity in every person we serve." Mary smiled, feeling that her mission was accomplished. It wasn't just about helping vulnerable families, although that was fundamental. It was about planting seeds of empathy and respect that would continue to grow and multiply through the people who had been touched by these experiences. Months later, at the recognition ceremony hosted by the City Hall, Mary was honored as Citizen of the Year for her contribution to the city's social development. When she went up on stage to receive the award, she saw familiar faces in the audience: Dr. Manessis, Carla, dozens of program volunteers, and many of the families she had visited over the years. In her short speech, Mary said, "This award doesn't belong to me alone. It belongs to every person who believes that small gestures of humanity can transform realities. It belongs to every professional who chooses to treat everyone with dignity. It belongs to every citizen who is willing to see and value the human being that exists in each of us." She paused and looked directly at Carla, who was in the front row. And it belongs especially to those who have the courage to acknowledge their mistakes and the wisdom to turn them into opportunities for growth. Carla wiped away a tear and smiled, knowing that those words were directed at her and everyone who, like her, had learned that true professional and personal success lies in the ability to honor the dignity of others. At the end of the ceremony, while Mary was talking to the people who came to congratulate her, a young journalist approached for an interview. "Mary, what is the most important message you would like to leave about your work?" Mary thought for a few seconds before answering. "I would like people to understand that there are no small contributions when it comes to human dignity. Every gesture of respect, every moment of genuine attention, every recognition of a person's worth can be the beginning of a profound transformation, not only in that person's life, but in the entire community around them." The journalist continued, "And what would you say to people who feel discouraged from doing volunteer work?" "I would say that we don't need to be perfect or have all the answers," Mary replied. "We just need to be willing to see the other as a human being worthy of respect and attention. The rest comes naturally with time and experience." As the interview continued, Dr. Meneses watched from afar, reflecting on how a moment of apparent insignificance, the misunderstanding at the reception months ago, had transformed into a profound and lasting institutional change. That night, when Mary arrived home, she found a handwritten letter from Mrs. Adelaide on the table. The elderly woman's handwriting was shaky but firm. "Dear Mary, today I taught sewing to 5 young mothers from the program. It's been years since I felt so useful and happy. Thank you for showing me that I still have so much to offer the world." Mary carefully folded the letter and tucked it into a special drawer, along with dozens of similar messages she had received over the months. Each one was a testament to how recognition and respect can awaken dormant potential and transform seemingly stagnant lives into sources of energy and social contribution. Before going to sleep, Mary looked out her bedroom window and observed the quiet city under the streetlights. Somewhere, she knew, there were families sleeping with more dignity and hope because of the work she and her team were doing. Somewhere, there were young professionals taking home a deeper understanding of the meaning of public service. Somewhere, there were volunteers discovering that their small contributions had immense value. But perhaps the most important thing was knowing that somewhere, people were learning to treat each other with the respect and dignity everyone deserves, creating small ripples of humanity that would expand infinitely through time and space. Mary fell asleep that night with the certainty that she had not only found purpose in her retirement, but also the confirmation of a simple and powerful truth. When we choose to see and honor the dignity in every person we meet, we create endless possibilities for transformation and hope. And sometimes, all it takes is someone courageous enough to say, "This person deserves respect," for an entire reality to be transformed.